Hello guys, welcome to another quiet journey through history. Tonight we will gently explore what beauty was like in ancient China in a calm and soothing way. I invite you to get comfortable now, close your eyes, and imagine yourselves drifting back through the centuries. We're going to a time and place where lantern light flickers softly against wooden lattice windows, and where the delicate scent of incense and flowers hangs in the cool night air. Before we begin our journey, I want to softly remind you that if you enjoy this gentle exploration, you might consider joining our little community by subscribing or just giving a like. It helps us continue these peaceful travels together. Also, I'd love for you to share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. It's always so interesting to see how far and wide these quiet moments reach, connecting us across the world. Now let's take a slow, deep breath and step quietly into the past. Imagine a pale light of dawn just beginning to glow on the horizon. In a serene courtyard, the world is still and hushed. The sky is a gentle gray blue, and a thin mist clings to the ground, wrapping ancient trees and curved roofs in a soft embrace. Inside a grand yet tranquil home, behind silk curtains embroidered with floral patterns, a noble woman awakens to begin her day. She moves slowly, unhurried, with the grace of someone who has never had to rush. The silk of her bed curtains shimmers faintly in the early light as she pushes them aside. Outside, a distant rooster crows, and then silence returns, as if even the birds and insects know to keep quiet in this tender moment. In her private chamber, a single bronze oil lamp still burns with a low flame, casting dancing shadows on painted walls. The air is cool and carries the faint fragrance of night-blooming jasmine from the garden outside. The floor is smooth wood, polished over years, cool against her bare feet as she steps onto it. She slides into delicate slippers and pulls a robe around herself. The robe is fine silk, light as a whisper against her skin, and it rustles softly with each movement. A young maidservant enters silently, bowing her head, carrying a ewer of warm water. The lady's day begins with gentle cleansing. She washes her face with water infused with fragrant herbs, perhaps petals of chrysanthemum or a touch of powdered sandalwood. The water is warm, steam rising in the cool morning air, and as she pats her face dry with a soft cloth, she feels the quiet invigoration of the herbal brew. Bathing is a ritual of renewal. Even if she does not immerse in a full bath this morning, she will carefully wipe her face and hands, refreshing herself with care. Imagine the quiet sounds of this routine, the soft splash of water as it's poured into a ceramic basin, the drip of droplets falling back, the rustle of cloth as she dries her face and neck. Each action is unhurried and mindful, as if the slowness itself is a form of meditation. There is no rush at all, only a deliberate, calm sequence that brings her from the world of sleep into the waking day. Now the maid helps her sit at a low vanity table made of polished wood. On the table lies a bronze mirror, its surface polished to a high sheen. By the lamp's glow and the growing morning light, the mirror offers a gentle reflection, slightly blurred and warm, not as sharp as our modern mirrors, but enough for her to see her face. She gazes for a moment at her own sleepy eyes and smooth cheeks, not yet adorned, naturally soft in the dawn. She is young, perhaps in her 20s, with an oval face, an egg-like face as admired in old sayings, and skin that has been carefully tended to be as fair and luminous as possible. In this era and culture, a pale complexion is considered a hallmark of beauty, a symbol of grace and high status. Her skin is light, with a soft translucence like the glow of the moon on water or the luster of fine white jade. To maintain such fair skin, she has avoided harsh sun all her life, using parasols or wide-brimmed hats with veils when she walks in the garden. The effort is worth it to her. Pale skin in ancient China carries its own poetry. In songs and poems, a lovely woman's skin might be likened to freshly fallen snow or to the petals of a white pear blossom. It suggests purity, refinement, and a life sheltered from toil under the sun. As she regards her face in the bronze mirror, she perhaps recalls a line from a poem that said a truly beautiful complexion glows like polished jade, moistened by dew. Jade, after all, is highly prized, cool, smooth, and flawless. To say someone has a jade-like face is the highest compliment, and so she takes quiet pride in the gentle pallor of her cheeks, seeing in them the reflection of that ideal. The maid has set out various items on the vanity. There are small porcelain dishes and ornate little boxes, a carved wood comb with fine teeth, and brushes made of soft animal hair. There is also a tiny bowl of water and some sticks of pigment. This is her cosmetic kit, prepared lovingly each day. Some of the containers are carved from fragrant wood and lacquered a deep red. Others are ceramic with hand-painted designs of flowers and birds. Each has its place. As she opens one lid, it makes the faintest click, the soft sound of lacquered wood fitting into place. Inside is a fine white powder. She dips her fingertips in and feels its silky texture. This is her face powder, the foundation of her makeup. The powder is made from ground rice mixed with other ingredients to help it adhere. It has a very faint fragrance of rice, and perhaps a hint of sweet-scented fermented water from its preparation. In earlier days, women used simply milled rice for this purpose, washed, soaked, fermented, and dried in the sun until it became a very fine, soft powder. Rice powder gives a gentle, pale cast to the skin, though it doesn't cling strongly. Lately, there have been more sophisticated powders made with white minerals, some even with lead for extra staying power. Indeed, it's known that certain expensive face creams contain lead to create an even more dazzling white effect. She has heard cautionary whispers that such things can harm the skin over time, that some beauties who use too much found their youthful glow fading too soon. Ancient poems occasionally lament how beauty is easily lost, which she knows hints at the toll of such toxic ingredients. So perhaps she uses a mixture, mostly rice powder for safety, with just a touch of something pearlescent to give her skin an ethereal sheen. If her family is wealthy enough, the powder might even contain a precious secret: crushed pearls. Pearl powder is rare and costly, made by grinding real pearls into fine dust. It's believed to nourish the skin and impart a soft radiance, as if one were literally applying moonlight to the face. She dips a small puff, or maybe just her fingers, into the powder and pats it gently across her face and neck. In the stillness of the morning, you can almost hear the delicate patting sound as she applies it in thin layers. A tiny cloud of fine white dust rises and settles with each pat, and the maid quickly moves to fan it away so her mistress doesn't breathe it in. The lady's face slowly takes on a more uniform, pale hue, like porcelain, yet it is not a garish mask. She applies just enough to even out her complexion and accentuate that coveted fairness. The goal is to appear effortlessly radiant, as if she were naturally blessed with skin like polished ivory. Next, she opens a small round box made of polished tin. Inside is a creamy substance with a deep rose-red color. This is her rouge, called yanji in classical language, a word that means red cosmetic, typically made from flowers. It has been prepared from safflower petals, soaked and pressed to extract their carmine dye, then mixed with a bit of animal fat or plant oil to form a smooth paste. Long ago, women used the petals of certain flowers directly, perhaps gently rubbing a petal on the cheeks to stain them a peachy pink. But over time, artisans refined the process, mixing flower pigments with oils or waxes to create rouge that could be pressed into cakes or kept in jars. This particular rouge from safflower is luxurious. Safflower blossoms yield a beautiful red hue, and were treasured for cosmetics. Some rouge recipes even include a touch of fragrant resin or spice, perhaps a drop of clove oil or ground cinnamon, both to preserve the product and to give a pleasant scent during application. As she lifts the lid, a faint floral sweetness mingles with the cool air. Using a slender ivory spatula or just her fingertip, she takes a tiny dab of the red rouge and applies it to her cheeks. She then uses a soft cloth or pad to blend it in circular motions. Slowly, a delicate flush blooms on her porcelain cheeks, like the first blush of dawn on snow, subtle yet lively. She must be careful not to overdo it, just enough to mimic the natural rosiness of health and youth. In this quiet moment, adding color to her face is almost like painting a delicate artwork. In fact, later someone might poetically say that her cheeks look as if a flower blooms on each side. The rouge also finds its way to her lips. In ancient China, a woman's lips are typically painted a shade of red, often deeper than the cheeks. The ideal lip shape is described as small and full, like a tiny cherry or a bud about to blossom. Rather than painting her full lips completely to their edges, which might make them look larger, she applies the color more to the center, making the lips appear small and heart-shaped. Using a fine brush, she traces the outline of a delicate curve on her upper lip, then fills it in with the safflower red paste. She presses her lips together softly to spread it evenly. When she relaxes them, they glisten with a soft, moist red sheen, as though she has just bitten into a ripe pomegranate seed. The effect is both vibrant and demure, bright red lips that stand out strikingly against her pale face, yet kept in a gentle shape that conveys refinement. Imagine for a moment the gentle fragrance surrounding these cosmetics. The rouge carries a hint of its floral origin. If you leaned in, you might catch a whisper of safflower or rose. The face powder has its subtle rice wine sweetness. Many cosmetic concoctions are lightly perfumed, so that the very act of applying them is a sensory pleasure. As she does her makeup, the lady inhales tiny hints of these calming aromas. The room itself still holds a trace of last night's incense, a bit of sandalwood and dried orange peel, slowly burned in a corner censer before bedtime. All these scents mingle subtly: the freshness of her herbal face wash, the rice powder's mild earthiness, the blossomy rouge, the lingering incense. Together they create a gentle perfume of morning rituals, unique to this ancient world. With her complexion now perfected to a fashionably pale radiance, and her lips and cheeks carrying a tender glow, she turns her attention to her eyebrows and eyes. The maid, anticipating this, hands her a thin brush and a small inkstone on which a dark pigment has been prepared. In those days, women often shape and draw their eyebrows to follow the beauty trends of the time. Eyebrows are considered extremely important to the overall expression of the face. They frame the eyes and convey subtle emotions even in stillness. For centuries, Chinese beauties have been likened to the moon and flowers, but also to other things like delicate butterfly wings or the distant silhouette of mountains, and these metaphors extend to eyebrow shapes as well. She picks up the smooth stone that holds the pigment. The pigment itself is called dye, a blue-black mineral powder often derived from oxidized indigo or other minerals. Mixed with a bit of water on the inkstone, it becomes a silky, inky paste. Gently, she touches the brush to the mixture, then lifts it to her brows. Before applying, she uses a tiny pair of tweezers to pluck any stray hairs. She had already shaped her brows previously, likely plucking them nearly completely and leaving just a thin base. Many fashionable women actually remove most of their natural brow hairs to redraw the shape from scratch each day, giving them freedom to follow the latest style. This morning, perhaps she chooses a classic shape known as the willow leaf eyebrow. It's long and slightly arched, tapering finely toward the ends, reminiscent of a slender willow leaf or the gentle curve of a willow branch. With the brush, she lightly sketches a fine line above each eye, extending gracefully toward the temples. The result is elegant and soft. Indeed, one Tang Dynasty poet described a beauty's brows as like willow leaves in the breeze. The willow symbolized grace and suppleness, so by carrying that image in her face, she projects a gentle, yielding charm. Alternatively, if she's feeling a touch bold, and if the current fashion allows, she might draw a style known as moth antenna brows. Those are a bit shorter, with a slight curve that swoops delicately like the antennae of a moth. This style was famously praised in the ancient Book of Songs, where a lover described his beloved's fine, curved brows as beautifully delicate as a moth's feelers. It's a timeless compliment, so much so that moth eyebrows became shorthand for a lovely woman. Whichever shape she chooses, it is done with a light and steady hand, the brush barely whispering across her skin. When she's satisfied, her eyebrows are symmetrical arches of soft black, giving her face a gentle, expressive look even in repose. She might also add a touch of color to her eyelids. There are ground minerals like malachite, a green pigment, or orpiment, a yellow gold, that some ladies dust lightly above their eyes, though eyeshadow is less common than other makeup elements. If she does, she keeps it subtle, a pale wash of color that one might not even notice in daylight, just a hint to accentuate the eye's depth. A tiny line of kohl might be applied to the lash line as well, to make her eyes appear larger or more defined, but always in a soft, smoked way, never harsh. And then a final artistic touch at the center of her forehead, just between and slightly above her brows, she affixes a tiny decoration. The maid carefully passes her a delicate little stamp or a petal-thin piece of colored paper. It's shaped like a flower. She moistens it with a bit of water or rice paste and presses it gently onto the smooth skin between her eyebrows. When she lifts it away, a tiny motif remains. This is called a huadian, an ornamental beauty mark. In this particular design, it resembles a plum blossom, a small flower with 5 round petals, each petal no bigger than a grain of rice, now adorning her forehead. It's a fashion that became wildly popular generations ago after a story spread about a princess who dozed under plum trees one early spring. In the tale, a plum blossom drifted down and landed on her forehead, leaving an imprint of pollen that looked like a delicate flower mark. The court ladies found it enchanting and soon began imitating the look by painting or gluing little blossoms on their foreheads. Over time, these huadian were made from gold leaf, colored silk, or even iridescent beetle wings, cut into tiny flower or moon shapes. Each season might bring new motifs. One year ladies fancied little butterflies at the brow, another year crescent moons or small birds. But the most classic is the plum blossom, a symbol of resilience and beauty that blooms in the cold of late winter. With that final flourish, Our Lady's face is now fully made up, according to the finest standards of her age. Her skin is moon pale and smooth, her cheeks softly petaled with pink, her lips like a small red flower bud, her eyebrows elegantly drawn in a timeless curve, and a charming plum blossom jewel graces her brow. Yet nothing is harsh, all is blended and gentle to the eyes. In the stillness of the morning, she looks at herself once more in the bronze mirror. The reflection flickers in the lamplight. Perhaps she tilts the mirror a bit to catch the strengthening daylight, now peeking through the window lattice. In the reflection, her face has taken on that idealized look, extolled by poets and painters. She embodies the classical virtues of beauty, a tranquil, modest demeanor, an appearance of delicate fragility, combined with careful elegance. As she gazes, one might wonder what thoughts pass through her mind. Is she pleased? Maybe she feels a small pride that she has achieved the look expected of a woman of her standing, yet her expression remains calm, almost meditative. Preparing herself like this each morning is not an exercise in vanity, so much as it is a required art, one she has been taught since she was a young girl at her mother's knee. Back then, she watched her mother or elder sisters apply powder and draw their brows, learning the techniques so that one day she too could present herself with dignity and grace. There were even written guides in some households, yellowing silk scrolls in which court ladies or physicians had recorded beauty tips and recipes for skin creams and hair tonics. Such scrolls, often copied by hand and shared quietly among ladies, carried titles like Adornment Secrets or Women's Toilets Explained. Though few survive, one can imagine their delicate illustrations of idealized faces and elegant calligraphy describing how to mix pearlescent powders or the proper way to sketch a willow leaf eyebrow. Over time, many of these works were lost or locked away in archives, much like the fading memories of the beauties who followed their counsel. But the practical knowledge lived on informally, passed from mother to daughter. Even without reading a word of a manual, a young girl would learn through her elders the subtle art of enhancing her natural gifts, the quiet tricks to accentuate her charm. In this society, how one appears is intertwined with respectability and honor. To be unkempt would show disrespect to others and to oneself. So she takes this time as a duty and also as a quiet pleasure, a private ritual before the day's social duties and labors begin. Now that her face is adorned, the lady moves on to tending her long black hair. Chinese tradition holds that hair is a precious gift from one's parents, not to be cut without good reason, so she has never had a drastic haircut. Instead, her hair has grown thick and long, flowing down past her waist when unbound. It is shiny and dark, often compared in poetry to a cloud or a waterfall. This morning, as on every morning, it needs to be brushed and arranged. She lets it down from the simple loose tie that held it overnight. The maid stands ready with a comb carved of jade. Why jade? Because jade is smooth and cool, and it is believed that combing the hair with jade imparts some of jade's purity and protective energy. Also, a fine lady's comb might well be made of precious materials like jade or ivory, rather than plain wood, to reflect her status. The maid begins at the very ends, gently detangling the strands. The comb moves through with a soft, repetitive scritch, an almost hypnotic rhythm in the silence. The lady closes her eyes, enjoying the soothing sensation of her scalp being gently scratched and her tresses being smoothed. Each stroke of the comb brings a new gleam to the hair. In the dim light, it shines like a raven's wing, lustrous and soft. Once it's thoroughly combed and free of tangles, they are ready to style it. The fashion for hair in her time is often elaborate. In different eras of ancient China, women's hairstyles varied greatly. In some periods, styles were relatively simple, a single low bun or a modest knot, while in others, especially for the wealthy, hair was an opportunity to display creativity, art, and rank. Let's say this lady lives in an era of sumptuous style, like the Tang Dynasty, known for its exuberant art and fashion. In such a case, she might opt for one of the grand coiffures popular at court. These could involve piling the hair up into a high mound, or bun, using padding or even extensions to add volume, and securing everything with beautiful pins and ornaments. Today she chooses a style that sweeps her hair up to the crown of her head and loops it into an elegant chignon with multiple coils. The maid swiftly yet carefully gathers the heavy locks, years of growth, and twists them into shape. Because the hair is so long and abundant, they use a bit of ingenuity. Some sections of hair might be braided first to create a stable base or to add interesting texture among the coils. One thick coil goes around the top of her head. Another forms a sort of graceful knot at the back. To hold these in place, the maid uses long hairpins. The first pins are functional, simple sticks of polished bone or wood that she slides through the bun to secure it. But after those, the real ornaments come out. From a lacquered jewelry box, the maid selects a pair of exquisite hairpins to place prominently in the lady's hair. These hairpins are made of gilt metal, perhaps gold or gold-plated bronze, and they are shaped like tiny flowers with filigree petals. Each pin has dangling pearls that swing gently as she moves. One pin might have a crafted golden plum blossom at its end, with a little pearl drop on a fine chain. Another pin might be topped with a tiny bird fashioned from kingfisher feathers, the bright blue iridescence of the feathers catching the morning light. These decorations will glint and tinkle faintly whenever she turns her head. Additionally, she slides in a comb-like ornament at the front of her hairdo. For example, a small decorative comb carved of ivory, etched with the motif of a phoenix spreading its wings. Each ornament carries meaning. The phoenix, for instance, is a symbol reserved for the empress, or associated with female virtue and grace in general. To wear a phoenix motif on a special occasion might hint at blessings of prosperity and a high station. Plum blossoms, as we know, symbolize resilience and hope, blooming even in winter's cold. Pearls represent purity and perfection, and jade pieces that might also adorn her pins or as beads on a hair tassel stand for nobility and goodness, and it's said jade has protective, almost spiritual qualities. The selection of what to wear is thoughtful. She wouldn't simply stick random things in her hair. It's a curated language of adornment, speaking to the occasion and her mood, albeit in a subtle, universally understood code. As final touches, the maid adds a silk ribbon as well, weaving it through the hair or tying it around the base of the bun in a pretty bow. The ribbon is a soft pastel color. Let's imagine a gentle robin's egg blue or pale peach that complements her gown. It trails slightly in the back, a playful yet elegant detail. Now our lady's hairstyle rises in an elegant shape on her head, increasing her stature. It is opulent but also refined. One can imagine that such a hairstyle might be depicted in the murals of a Tang-era tomb or in the painted scrolls of the imperial court. A tall, intricate tower of shiny black hair, decorated with gold and silk, denoting her status and the care taken in her appearance. With hair and makeup complete, the lady stands, and her maid helps her into her attire for the day. Up until now, she's likely been in a simple inner robe, but now she will don a more formal outfit, suitable for being seen by family or any visitors, or simply to feel properly dressed for her own daily activities. Clothing in ancient China, especially for a person of rank, is a matter of layers. She begins with a soft inner tunic of lightweight cotton or silk gauze, which wraps around her body and ties securely, providing a base. Over that, she puts on a long gown with wide sleeves. Picture the process. The maid brings the outer robe, which is made of fine silk and dyed a gentle color, maybe a pale celadon green, reminiscent of new willow leaves, or a warm lotus pink, depending on the season and her preference. The color is carefully chosen. Bright scarlet red, for example, is usually reserved for joyous events like weddings or festivals. Pure white is used for mourning and would not be worn unless in bereavement. Black is considered solemn and strong, but is seldom a main color in a young lady's wardrobe, except perhaps as elegant trim. Our Lady selects a tasteful soft hue that flatters her. She extends her arms gracefully and slips them into the robe's voluminous sleeves. These sleeves are flowing and long, so long they might brush the floor if she let them hang. This is a style among nobility, sleeves that drape and sway, often covering the hands or extending well beyond them. They make each gesture appear slow and elegant, as if every movement is part of a dance. The silk fabric glides over her skin, cool and smooth. As the maid adjusts the robe on her shoulders, the lady can feel the subtle weight of the embroidery on it. This robe is decorated with fine embroidery, a quiet statement of luxury and artistry. Along the edges of the sleeves and the hem of the skirt, swirling patterns of flowers and auspicious symbols have been stitched in colored thread. Perhaps there are delicate sprigs of plum blossom and orchid near the cuffs, representing perseverance and purity. Perhaps along the hem near her feet, there are bamboo leaves and chrysanthemum flowers. Bamboo for integrity and grace, chrysanthemum for elegant simplicity and the autumn season. On the back of the robe, subtle but shimmering when the light hits, the form of a crane in flight might be woven or embroidered in white thread on pale fabric. The crane symbolizes longevity and peace. Each motif is chosen with intention. Plum, orchid, bamboo, and chrysanthemum are actually called the four gentleman plants in Chinese art, each symbolizing virtues of the ideal person. By wearing them, she symbolically wraps herself in those virtues. The embroidery is done so finely that one cannot see knots or loose threads on the outside. It's as if the designs grew naturally from the fabric. Layer by layer, she completes her dressing. Over the main robe, she might don a short jacket or shawl if the weather is cool. A filmy silk gauze, known as a pibo, can be draped over her shoulders. It's light and translucent, perhaps embroidered at the ends with tiny butterflies or flowers. It adds an ethereal touch as if a misty cloud were wrapped around her. At her waist, she ties a long sash to secure the robe. The sash is a wide band of silk, perhaps in a contrasting yet harmonious color. If her robe is green, the sash might be a pale gold. If her robe is pink, the sash might be deep maroon. She wraps it around her middle, and the maid helps tie it at the back or side in an ornate knot. The ends of the sash hang down, often with embroidered tips or tassels. This sash not only holds everything in place, but also accentuates the graceful shape of her body. It creates the illusion of a very slim waist, which is considered elegant. A tiny waist, referred to in literature as a willow waist, has been praised in Chinese poetry as a mark of beauty. One ancient story tells of a court dancer so slender that the emperor could supposedly encircle her waist with his hands. While that may be an exaggeration, the aesthetic of a gently cinched waist, contrasting with the flowing sleeves and skirt, was certainly appreciated. With the sash secured, she attaches a few personal accessories to it. One is a small embroidered sachet filled with perfume. This sachet is made of fine brocade fabric, embroidered with tiny patterns, perhaps a pair of mandarin ducks, symbols of love, or an intricate geometric design. It's cinched with a drawstring of silk braid and hangs from the sash by a loop. Inside, it carries aromatic treasures, dried petals of jasmine and rose, a pinch of powdered clove or cinnamon, maybe a bit of ground sandalwood, and a dab of musk. It's like a little portable potpourri. As she moves throughout the day, the sachet will brush against her robes and release subtle whiffs of fragrance that only someone very close might notice. In a world without modern perfumes, these sachets serve both to lightly perfume the body and to ward off insects or unpleasant smells. They're deeply personal too. Often a young woman blends a scent to her liking, so that those close to her associate that gentle fragrance only with her. Perhaps this lady's signature scent, known only to her family or one special person, is a calming mix of dried lotus, plum blossom, and a hint of vanilla-like benzoin resin, a whisper of sweetness amid the freshness. Next to the sachet, she also tucks a folding fan into her sash. The fan is an indispensable accessory for a refined lady. Hers might be crafted of painted silk on bamboo ribs. When opened, it reveals a delicate painting, maybe a scene of willows by a moonlit lake, or a pair of lovebirds on a blossom branch. Perhaps a line of poetry is written on it in calligraphy, something meaningful to her. The fan serves many purposes: to gently cool herself in warm weather, to shield her face modestly from either sun or inquisitive eyes, and simply to give her hands something graceful to do when sitting in polite company. The slight flutter of a fan can itself be alluring, or communicate mood, covering a smile in coyness, for instance. She slides the fan in at her waist. Its tassel, attached to the handle, dangles against her skirt. She also slips on a few pieces of jewelry now, graceful dangling earrings, each featuring a teardrop pearl that catches the light with a soft glow. As she secures them, the cool pearls brush her neck. Pearls are treasured in this culture not only for their beauty, but as symbols of purity and integrity. Around her wrist, she might clasp a bracelet of fine jade beads. Jade is highly esteemed, more valuable than gold in many cases, because it is thought to embody virtue. It's smooth and slightly warm to the touch once it absorbs her body heat. The Chinese saying goes that jade represents a gentleman's, or in this case, a lady's, benevolence, integrity, and wisdom. Wearing it is not just ornamental, but spiritually grounding. On her fingers, she may slide a slim gold ring or two, or perhaps she prefers not to wear rings in the morning. Some women saved rings for going out, or special occasions. Notably, her hands are kept very delicate and soft, a point of pride as a sign of a life of leisure. No calluses, nails neatly shaped and possibly tinted with a pale hue from balsam flower dye. In some eras, women painted their nails a translucent red using henna or balsam petals mixed with alum, which also strengthened the nails. If she has done so, her nails carry a light rosy tint, not opaque like modern polish, but a subtle blush, as though her nails themselves are naturally pink and healthy. Now, she is nearly ready. She stands in front of a tall bronze mirror that her maid has positioned for her to see her full figure. In the reflection stands a vision of an ideal ancient beauty. Her form is draped in flowing silks that whisper with each subtle movement, long sleeves trailing like the wings of a celestial maiden. The morning light, stronger now, catches in the golden threads of her embroidery and in the pearls of her hairpins, making them gleam softly. Her face, framed by those ornate coiffures and dangling earrings, is serene, almost expressionless, yet not cold. Rather, she has the calm, composed look that befits a woman of her upbringing. It's the look taught by mothers and etiquette instructors, not to grin too widely, to keep one's lips gently together in the hint of a smile, to convey warmth and kindness through the eyes rather than through broad gestures or loud laughter. Such composure is equated with elegance and self-control. She gazes at herself with a mild, contemplative look, head slightly tilted. The symmetry of her reflection would please any onlooker of her time. Symmetry is deeply valued in beauty, the two brows matching like twin bows, the two halves of her face mirroring each other in balanced harmony, the pattern on her sash perfectly centered. Symmetry suggests an ordered nature, a body and mind in balance, which to them echoes an inner moral balance as well. Meanwhile, the oval shape of her face, often compared to the full moon or a precious egg, is unmarred by any harsh angles. Her features are neither too large nor too small, moderate, harmonious, each in correct proportion as classical canons of beauty describe. She takes a final deep breath, letting the weight and presence of her adornments settle on her. Each piece she has put on powder, paint, hairpins, silk robes, is like a layer of character or a role she plays in society's great theater of decorum and expectation. Yet within all this, her own spirit still quietly shines through her eyes. In the mirror, those eyes are dark and clear, with a gentle gleam. Perhaps she is thinking of the day ahead, or maybe her mind wanders beyond the walls of her home, out to the little lake she can glimpse through the window. For a second, a true private smile tugs at her lips as a thought or memory pleases her, a small, genuine smile that lights her eyes for just a heartbeat. In that moment, her beauty becomes not just the result of artifice and grooming, but a living, breathing warmth from within. She immediately tamps down the smile, schooling her features back to demure placidity. One never knows if a servant or family member might walk in, but that micro-expression has already given her face an endearing hint of personality beyond the flawless surface. Now fully dressed and prepared, she steps toward the door to start her day beyond her chambers. She moves with measured steps. The floor-length silk skirt of her hanfu glides gracefully, and thanks to the skirt's cut and the cultural training she's had since childhood, her feet take small, elegant steps naturally. In fact, it's customary and expected to take short, almost gliding steps. One never stomps or strides in haste. Her feet themselves are encased in tiny silk slippers. These shoes are beautifully embroidered, perhaps with a pattern of lotus flowers at the toes and swirling clouds along the sides. They have thin soles of layered cloth or paper. They fit just right, maybe only a few inches longer than her actual foot. It's possible her feet were bound when she was a little girl, if she lives in a later era when that practice prevailed, which would make her feet remarkably small, about 3 to 4 inches long, and force her to walk in a distinct, mincing way. If that is the case, each step she takes might bring a slight twinge of pain in her compressed feet, but she has long learned to suppress any grimace and to walk with the swaying, delicate gait that bound feet necessitate. It's a slow, careful walk, though to onlookers it appears as a dainty, floating motion, poetic in its restraint, if one overlooks the suffering behind it. How ironic that what appears so graceful and gentle is born of ache and restriction, but such was the price of beauty for many generations, a price paid silently and stoically, as open complaint would tarnish the image of effortless grace. However, let us suppose that in this particular morning, Our Lady's feet are natural. Perhaps we are envisioning an earlier time, like the Tang period, before foot binding became widespread, or perhaps her enlightened family did not bind her. Then her small steps are simply by choice and training, not by physical limitation. Her shoes, while small and narrow, are comfortable enough. She can balance with ease, yet still, she does not hurry, because part of the language of her movement is leisureliness. To rush or make noise would be unbecoming. A refined lady glides like water, slow and untroubled. As she steps out onto the covered veranda overlooking her courtyard, the world greets her softly. The morning mist has begun to lift, revealing a tranquil garden with a little pond. The leaves of a willow tree by the water's edge stir gently in a tiny breeze. She pauses at the wooden railing for a moment, resting her hands lightly on the cool surface. Her long sleeves cover most of her hands, only the tips of her slender fingers visible, long tapered fingers that have never been roughened by menial work. Delicate hands were and are much admired. Soft, pale hands with tapering fingers were seen as a mark of a well-bred lady. She has even been careful to protect her hands from the sun, and she applies moisturizing creams of beeswax and sesame oil at night to keep them supple. Her nails, tinted lightly from balsam flower dye, are glossy and well-shaped, extending just a little beyond her fingertips as a fashion. She is mindful not to grow them too long. That can be impractical, but some noble women do keep a few nails long as a status symbol. From the kitchen yard, beyond a screen of bamboo, she can faintly smell rice porridge being cooked and hear a distant clink of a pot lid, signs that breakfast will soon be prepared. But for now, she allows herself this quiet moment. In her mind, she might recite a line of poetry to the dawn, something she memorized in girlhood, perhaps a verse about morning dew or blossoms opening to the new day. Or she may simply observe the scene, the way the light plays on the pond's surface, the subtle movement of koi fish beneath a lily pad. If one listened closely, one might hear the gentle swish of her silken skirt as it brushes the polished wooden floor, or the nearly inaudible jingle of her jade bracelet as she lifts a hand to tuck a stray hair back under a pin. She picks up a cup of warm tea that a servant quietly brought and left on a tray nearby. The tea is a delicate green tea, infused with a few osmanthus flowers. As she sips, the fragrant warmth spreads through her. The steam mingles with the cool morning air, momentarily fogging the edge of her bronze mirror set down beside the cup. She closes her eyes for a moment, simply savoring the interplay of sensations, the taste of the fragrant tea, the gentle weight of her earrings on her lobes, the faint coolness of jade bangles on her wrist, the subtle scent of her own perfume sachet mingling with the distant aroma of blooming gardenia from outside. Life at this moment is slow and graceful, as though every aspect of the world has conspired to create a scene of perfect calm beauty for her to inhabit. This is how a day of beauty might begin in ancient China, quietly, artfully, steeped in tradition and mindful ritual. Every detail, from the stroke of the comb through her hair to the embroidery on her hem, is part of an intricate language of aesthetics. It speaks not in words, but in textures, colors, and subtle movements. To an outside observer from another world or time, these details might seem extravagant or overly formal, but to her and to those around her, they are the daily fabric of life, as meaningful as any spoken conversation. Through them, she communicates who she is, her upbringing, her respect for culture, her understanding that beauty is not merely personal vanity, but a kind of contribution to the harmony and dignity of her family and society. As the sun climbs higher, the soft early light that favored her tranquil preparations will turn clearer and busier. Soon, perhaps, family members will greet her in the hall, or she will attend to household matters, maybe supervising servants in arranging fresh flowers in the vases, or doing a bit of embroidery by the window, or practicing brushstrokes of calligraphy for self-cultivation. But she will carry this morning serenity with her, and in the graceful way she presents herself, face made up like a delicate porcelain figure, hair an ornate crown, garments flowing with each step, she contributes a note of quiet elegance to the day's unfolding. Each time her silk sleeves whisper as they move, it is like a gentle reminder of refinement. Each time her perfume sachet releases a breath of fragrance, it adds a note to the invisible symphony of senses that make up daily life in her home. And each time she lowers her eyes modestly before speaking, one sees the embodiment of an ancient ideal, that beauty is not only in physical features or fine clothes, but in demeanor, in restraint, in the aura that surrounds a person who has mastered the art of graceful living. So here we have spent a morning with one woman in one courtyard, a portrait of cultivated beauty at the break of day. But our journey does not end at her threshold. In truth, this is just one glimpse into a vast and varied tapestry of what beauty meant across the many eras and regions of ancient China. As gentle observers floating through history, let us not stay confined to this single time and place. We can let our imagination carry us to other eras and settings, to see how ideals of beauty shifted and transformed, even as the core love of elegance and grace endured. Across the sweep of Chinese history, different dynasties and regions prized different looks. As we drift onward, imagine now the passage of centuries like the turning of a page. The aesthetic sensibilities evolve with each era, reflecting changes in philosophy, wealth, and cultural exchange. Yet certain threads remain. In far earlier times, many centuries before our elegant ladies era, beauty might have been expressed in simpler ways. Picture the Han Dynasty over 2,000 years ago. A Han noblewoman's daily routine would have been similar in its love of grace, yet her style was a bit more reserved. Tang Dynasty art and poetry suggest women wore their hair in relatively modest coils or low buns, often with a single jade pin. Their clothing was long and flowing, but in more muted, solid colors, emphasizing gentle lines over lavish ornament. Makeup was used, but with a light touch, a sheer dusting of rice powder, a soft rouge on the lips, perhaps a little black tint on the brows, using charcoal or ink. Delicate moth eyebrows were already admired back then, and a natural gracefulness was key. The Han ideal praised a look of slender youthfulness. One famous beauty of the Western Han, Lady Zhao Feiyan, was said to be so light and lithe that she could dance upon a raised hand. Surely a fanciful exaggeration, but it shows how daintiness and elfin grace were revered. Yet, even during Han times, we read that balance was favored. A woman should not be so thin as to appear ill, nor so plump as to seem indolent. There was a saying that the truly beautiful move like flowing water and stand like the graceful pine. Now let the centuries roll on to the Tang Dynasty, often considered a pinnacle of Chinese culture. In the Tang era, a more exuberant, cosmopolitan atmosphere prevailed. The empire was wealthy, open to foreign influence, and art celebrated fullness and vitality. The feminine ideal during much of Tang actually embraced a fuller figure, rounded cheeks, a slight healthy plumpness of form. A classic example is Yang Guifei, the beloved consort of Emperor Xuanzong, who has been immortalized as one of the 4 great beauties of Chinese lore. She was renowned for her voluptuous beauty. Poets described her face as radiant as a rose, and her form as soft and luxurious. In many Tang paintings and sculptures, women are depicted with ample bodies, confidently carrying themselves in tailored silk robes that accentuate their curves. This was considered beautiful, a sign of prosperity and desirability. Tang style in dress and cosmetics was also lavish and bold. Women's clothing could be striking, low-cut gowns that bared a glimpse of the neckline and shoulders, a shock to more conservative later eyes. High-waisted skirts in brilliant colors like vermilion, emerald, or imperial yellow, paired with long shawls of gauze that draped around the arms. Women of the Tang court were known to wear men's riding outfits on occasion, for example, when playing polo, a favorite sport. Short jackets and tight trousers, which shows a certain confidence and freedom in fashion then. Hairstyles in Tang reached towering heights. Literally, women constructed spectacular upswept hairdos, sometimes a foot high, often augmented with wigs and ornaments. They adorned these with silk flowers, gold sparrow ornaments, trailing ribbons, and even fresh flowers like peonies stuck into the coils. A famous style was the cloud bun, a voluminous arrangement that looked like a drifting cloud atop the head. The more elaborate, the better. Some depictions show as many as 7 or 8 pins and combs in one hairstyle, with flowing tassels. Makeup in Tang could be dramatic. Aside from the standard powder and rouge, Tang ladies loved to decorate the face with tiny patterns. Not only the Huadian on the forehead, like Our Lady did, but also sometimes little designs at the outer corners of the eyes, or small decorative patches on the cheeks. They might cut gold leaf into the shapes of tiny flowers or butterflies, and apply them beside the eyes for a party, sparkling when they blinked. The eyebrows of Tang women went through trend after trend, from distant mountain brows, long, thin, and gently peaked like distant peaks on the horizon, to leaf brows which were broad and short. One later Tang fashion was the osmanthus leaf brow, thick and sort of like an upside-down crescent. One year thin was in, another year thick was in vogue. They even had a saying, each spring new brows, teasing how fickle eyebrow fashions were. Another striking Tang trend was the use of sha or red cloud makeup, applying a wash of red or pink not just on the cheeks, but also across the temples, even the forehead, to give a very flush of spring vigor to the face. And lips in Tang could be painted in different shapes. There was the small cherry style, just the center as a bud, and also the full lip style, when bolder fashion prevailed. We read of court ladies with vermilion lips like ripe persimmons. Clearly, Tang women were not shy about cosmetics. And what of skin tone? Pale skin was still prized. No tan, thank you, but Tang beauties sometimes favored a slightly warmer ivory than the ghostly white of later eras. Some even dusted a little yellow or ochre tint to simulate a healthy sunny glow. This was rare but mentioned. However, the norm remained a refined fairness. Not all beauty practices were universal, of course. China is vast, and regional customs varied. In some far southern regions, or among certain ethnic communities, young women even dyed their teeth a gleaming black once they came of age. Far from being seen as unattractive, this lacquered black smile was a symbol of maturity, beauty, and status in those cultures. It was believed to preserve the teeth and added a striking contrast to their fair skin and red lips, a unique mark of charm within those communities, even while other parts of China prized pearly white teeth. This practice of teeth blackening, some may know of the Japanese ohaguro. It had parallels in southern China and Southeast Asia, might seem strange to an outsider, but to those women, a flash of glossy black behind a shy smile was the height of allure and proof that they were properly grown and marriageable. As we move past Tang into the Song Dynasty, 10th, 13th centuries, we find an atmosphere that is more restrained, scholarly, and inward-looking. The Song era valued refinement and a kind of cultivated simplicity. The flamboyance of Tang was seen as excessive by the more conservative Neo-Confucian ethos of song, so fashion became elegant but subdued. Women's robes tended to have higher collars, covering the skin up to the neck, and looser, long sleeves that weren't as sheer. Colors were often lighter or softer, pale blues, sage greens, whites, light grays. Patterns were woven into the fabric rather than all embroidered on top, giving a tone-on-tone elegance rather than high contrast. The ideal song beauty was often described as slender and willowy. The plump ideal faded somewhat. A delicate, perhaps slightly ethereal look was admired. One of the famous beauties in song tales is Li Qingzhou, not just for her looks, but for her poetic genius and graceful presence. She was said to be as beautiful in spirit as in face. In song paintings, women usually have a demure expression, hair parted in the middle and drawn into a neat bun or coil at the back, often covered by a soft headscarf or draped cloth for married women. Modesty was key. Cosmetics in song were definitely used, powder, rouge, etc., but in moderation. The eyebrows were again mostly thin and arched in a gentle shape, sometimes called new moon brows because they mimicked a crescent moon. Overall, the look was that of a cultured, modest gentlewoman. One development of the later Tang and Song eras that tragically took deep root was foot binding. There is a story that this custom began in the late Tang, inspired by a palace dancer who bound her feet to dance en pointe on a lotus-shaped stage, enchanting the emperor with her tiny steps. Whatever its origin, by the Song Dynasty, foot binding had become a widespread practice among the Han Chinese upper class and continued to spread in the following centuries. It involved breaking and tightly binding the feet of young girls, usually starting between ages 5 and 7, to prevent them from growing and to mold them into a curved, arched shape known as a lotus foot. The ideal bound foot was only about 3 inches long. The process was agonizing and permanently disabled the women to some degree, limiting their mobility to short, shuffling steps. Yet this became the height of feminine allure and virtue in later traditional Chinese society. To us, it sounds unimaginable that such pain was inflicted for beauty, but for 1,000 years, Tiny bound feet were exalted in poems and songs as the ultimate mark of a genteel woman. A woman with small, delicate golden lotuses was considered refined, marriageable, and her sway when walking, caused by the balance challenge, was thought sensuous. Mothers who loved their daughters nonetheless bound their feet, believing sincerely it was necessary for their future security and happiness. By the time of the Ming 14th, 17th centuries and Qing 17th, early 20th centuries, foot binding was nearly ubiquitous among Han women of the upper and middle classes. Only those who toiled in the fields or belonged to certain non-Han ethnic groups did not practice it. The ideal foot was so small that it was literally called a 3-inch golden lotus. Tiny sequin shoes, almost like doll's shoes, were made to fit these feet, often beautifully embroidered with flowers or butterflies. Ironic, given the pain hidden within. Women learned to move gracefully despite the discomfort, taking very short steps and often leaning on a maid or using a cane in older age, yet maintaining the poise expected of them. In a poetic sense, society mistook this enforced fragility for virtue. A bound-foot woman was physically limited to the home, a sign that she was noble and did not need to work or wander, hence morally upright by their standards. It's a bittersweet, somber part of beauty history. Let us gently acknowledge this suffering while also understanding the cultural context that celebrated it. It is a quiet suffering, largely unvoiced, that underlay the elegant image of countless women in late imperial times. Many endured it as their fate, finding ways to still find joy and purpose within that constraint. Sometimes beauty in history has had a cruel price, and this is one of the stark examples. As for the Qing Dynasty, which was China's final imperial dynasty, ruled by the Manchu people, 1644-1912, beauty ideals had another shift. The Manchu nobility did not bind feet. They even tried to ban it among Han subjects without much success, and they had their own dress code. Manchu women wore platform shoes with a pedestal in the middle. Imagine a mini 2-inch high stool under the sole, which allowed them to have a natural foot, but still a swaying gait. They also adopted a distinctive hairstyle. The hair was parted into 2 wings, and then joined onto a large flat ornament on the head, almost like a flat butterfly, or board draped with silk flowers, which was very striking. Meanwhile, Han women under Qing continued their bound-foot, Han-Fu-influenced styles at home, but gradually even Han clothing changed under Manchu rule. Women's jackets with high collars and side fastenings became common. Throughout all these changes, one can see a pendulum swinging between periods that favored opulence and those that favored simplicity. But some things remained constant. A luminous fair complexion was always extolled. Long, lustrous hair was always considered a woman's crowning glory. Tiny, graceful movements were admired, whether natural or enforced, and the notion that a beautiful exterior should reflect a gentle, virtuous interior was a continuous moral theme. Class also played a major role in beauty. Our narrative has mostly wandered through palaces and grand houses. For women of the peasantry or lower classes, life was different. They did not have time or means for elaborate beautification, yet beauty still touched their lives in simpler ways. A farm girl might wash her face with rice water to keep her skin clear because that's a home remedy, her mother taught. She might decorate her hair on festival days with a fresh wildflower or wear a homemade string of colorful beads. Her everyday fashion was often a blue or brown cotton tunic and trousers, practical for work, but on New Year's or at the temple fair, she might proudly wear a skirt of bright cloth and a jacket embroidered at the cuffs by her own hand, with patterns her village favors. For instance, in southwest China, minority women even to this day wear vibrant costumes with bold silver jewelry and heaps of embroidery. Those traditions stretch back ages, representing their own ideals of beauty, which often celebrate fertility, luck, and community identity. In market towns and cities, the merchant class or artisan women had an interesting intermediate status. They had some wealth, but often not noble rank, so they copied what they could of elite fashion, but within rules. Perhaps a merchant's wife in the Ming Dynasty wore a beautifully tailored jacket and skirt in rich green silk, but unlike an aristocrat, she was not allowed to wear certain colors reserved for the nobility, like pure bright yellow was imperial, bright red often for ceremonies. Still, by the late imperial period, commoner women across cities bound their feet and followed the general aesthetic of the time, showing how these beauty practices trickled down. Social life in the palace provides another stark view of beauty. It was competitive. The emperor's harem of concubines is a world where dozens, sometimes hundreds of women vied for the attention of one man. They were selected often as teenagers for their looks and talents. After that initial selection, they had to maintain favor through charm and beauty, often amidst jealousy and intrigue. An imperial concubine would spend hours each day on grooming, servants dressing her hair anew, helping her into grand embroidered gowns, painting her face in the latest court style, so that if she were summoned by the emperor that evening, she would be flawless like a work of art. They were even trained in how to walk and speak in the most enchanting manner. There's a record from the Tang of how Yang Guifei would bathe in a pool of scented goat's milk to keep her skin soft, perhaps apocryphal, but it paints the picture of luxury. In the Qing court, there were attendants whose job was solely to prepare the empress's clothes and hair ornaments each morning, and others to present trays of cosmetics. The palace had its own ateliers for weaving fine silks, making perfumes, and crafting jewelry to supply the ladies with endless adornments. Beauty was almost a duty for them, a full-time occupation they owed to the aura of the imperial family. Yet, that beauty could also feel like a cage. Imperial women, especially concubines, were largely confined to the inner court, not allowed to freely roam outside or have ordinary family lives. Their days might be filled with music practice, embroidery, and waiting, always waiting. One can imagine a group of exquisitely dressed consorts sitting in a splendid hall, still as painted figures, while outside the seasons change and wars and politics rage, untouched and voiceless. They must have felt lonely, isolated despite being surrounded by splendor. Beauty in the palace was a performance, a decorous display kept up at all times. A concubine could never let her veneer crack in public. She had to remain the picture of elegance, even if sadness weighed on her, and in many cases their names were forgotten by history. They remained just titles in records, like consort virtue or pure concubine, their real selves lost. This lends a certain melancholy to those luxurious images, a bittersweet tragedy of beauty, untouched by memory. We see their faces perhaps in a painting, or imagine their graceful figures through a poem, but we don't know their thoughts or feelings. Their beauty was admired in their time, but ultimately ephemeral, like a flower that blooms behind palace walls and falls unseen by all but a few. In society at large, beauty also delineated rank. Sumptuary laws dictated who could wear what. For example, only the emperor could wear a bright yellow robe with dragon motifs. Only the empress could wear certain phoenix designs, and the famed phoenix crown, an elaborate headdress of gold and kingfisher feathers worn on coronations or weddings. Upper-class women could wear silk of multiple colors and pattern their clothes with peonies, symbol of wealth, or lotuses, purity, whereas a poor woman might be restricted to undyed hemp or simple indigo-dyed cotton, Cosmetics, too, had hierarchies. Pearl or silver powder was for those who could afford literal jewels on their face. Common folk used rice powder, or even just a dusting of white chalky earth. Only a wealthy household could spend money on fine scented oils imported from afar, like jasmine essence from India or ambergris from the ocean, whereas a village girl would use plain sesame oil to shine her hair and maybe tuck fresh herbs in it for scent. Let us consider now the role of men in this landscape of beauty. While men were not subjected to such elaborate cosmetic rituals, and certainly no foot binding, they too had ideals of appearance and grooming. A well-groomed gentleman in ancient China took pride in a neat and dignified look. He would grow his hair long, as cutting it was also taboo for men. They would instead tie it up and gather it into a top knot, which was then covered by a cap or bound with a headband or a jade clasp. For formal occasions, men wore hats appropriate to their rank. An official might wear a black gauze cap with wing-like flaps. A scholar might wear a simple black silk cap, a young man perhaps a headscarf. Their robes were mostly in solid, deeper colors, darker blues, grays, browns, black, and for the highest ranks, rich embroidery of dragons or official insignia. But within that restrained palette, material and cleanliness were key. A gentleman's robes should be spotless, well-fitted, made of good silk or fine linen. Even the way he tied his sash and hung his insignia of office or his personal fan was part of the presentation. While it was frowned upon for men to adorn themselves too much, excess jewelry or makeup on a man could invite ridicule, implying effeminacy or moral weakness in that cultural view. Subtle refinement was admired. Men certainly used fragrance. A scholar might burn incense in his study, and his clothes would absorb a pleasant scent of sandalwood or agarwood. Or he might carry a small incense satchel too, somewhat more quietly than women did, maybe tucked in a sleeve. Some historical accounts mention well-known male aesthetes who loved perfume. For instance, the Tang Dynasty poet and statesman Su Shi once wrote about a kind of sachet he made for himself with aromatic medicines to ward off summer heat. Men also cared about their complexion to a degree. They wouldn't paint their faces white, but an educated man avoided suntan because being dark implied working in fields, thus lower status. So scholars stayed indoors studying, naturally remaining pale. Some men did secretly use a light dusting of rice powder or ground white jade on their faces for important ceremonies to look fresh. There are jokes in literature about men checking the mirror to make sure they look presentable. And at court, good looks in a man could actually be an asset too, though talent and lineage mattered more. A famous historical heartthrob was Pan Yue of the Western Jin, 3rd century. He was so renowned for his handsome face and elegant demeanor that women of the capital literally threw fruits and flowers into his carriage as he passed, a scene often alluded to as an example of female admiration. Another was Prince Lanling of northern Qi, 6th century, a warrior prince who was said to have a face so beautiful it was almost feminine, and thus wore a ferocious mask in battle to frighten enemies, and perhaps to prove his manliness. These tales show that male beauty, while not as cosmetically contrived, was acknowledged and even romanticized in history. Men expressed care for their appearance by maintaining a well-groomed beard if they were older. Confucian tradition considered a man's beard and mustache a sign of maturity and wisdom. To have it wild and unkempt would be sloppy. They kept their fingernails trimmed neat. Though some scholars grew the nail of their little finger long as a symbol, they did no manual labor. They might even, in certain decadent courts, lightly rouge their lips or darken their eyebrows. It's recorded that Emperor Ai of Han, 1st century BCE, liked to powder his face to appear more youthful, and some aristocrat men of the 6 dynasties, 3rd-6th century era, were said to dust their cheeks with a pale glitter. Of course, these were considered eccentric cases. Generally, a man's beauty routine was limited to bathing, putting on clean garments, combing his hair, maybe perfuming it with a bit of fragrant oil, and ensuring his hat sat correctly. One constant expectation for both genders was personal cleanliness, at least among those who could afford it. Bathing practices in ancient China were influenced by seasons and access to water. Wealthy people had private bath chambers, often wooden tubs. They would periodically indulge in long baths infused with perfumed herbs. For example, bathing with mugwort and calamus was popular on Double Fifth, the Duanwu festival, for purification. Women might rinse their hair with rinse water steeped in gardenia or tea leaves for shine, or wash their faces with water that rice had been soaked in. Rice water is mildly exfoliating and still used today for soft skin. In daily life, they might not bathe fully every day, especially in winter, but they certainly washed the face and hands each morning and wiped the body with a hot towel. Public bathhouses existed in larger cities, often with separate hours or days for women and men, and there were attendants who provided scrubbing and massage services. A first-time traveler to the Tang capital from abroad marveled at how many bathhouses there were and how the elite had hot water on tap in their mansions. A well-to-do woman might have a whole array of bathing accoutrements, bronze mirrors engraved with mythical beasts to hang on the bathhouse wall, cedarwood buckets for pouring water, pumice stones for rubbing the feet, soft cloths of ramie fiber for washing, and ceramic bottles filled with scented oils to dab on afterward. Hair washing was an event of its own, often done weekly or every few days, rather than daily, since it was laborious to dry those thick, long tresses without modern conveniences. When a noble woman washed her hair, she likely used a special shampoo mixture called gaoshu, made of ground soybeans or rice bran, that lathers slightly and cleans gently, sometimes mixed with perfumed herbs. Another traditional shampoo was the powder of the wu plant, or soapberry, Chinese honey locust fruit that foams naturally. They would wash hair with warm water in a basin, the maid pouring water slowly over her head as she sat, then working in the cleansing paste at the scalp. After thorough rinsing, they might apply camellia oil or apricot kernel oil to condition the hair and give it shine. Then the hair would be dried in the sun or by a brazier in winter, the lady sitting patiently as the maid carefully combed through the damp locks. That warm, intimate scene of hair care was a common bonding time between mistress and trusted maid, or between a mother and daughter. One can almost hear the drip of water and feel the afternoon sun on one's back, combined with the soothing sensation of someone combing out your wet hair, truly a languid, relaxing ritual. There were also many homemade remedies and beauty secrets passed down. For skincare, crushed pearl mixed with egg white was used as a night mask to improve luster. Ground mung beans could be made into a paste to clear heat-based acne or rashes. Women might brew teas of chrysanthemum or goji berry to brighten the eyes, as it was thought too. They believed in nourishing beauty from within too. Soups with tremella mushroom, a white fungus, were consumed for a moist complexion. Sesame and walnut were eaten for shiny hair. These reflect a traditional concept that inner health and balance manifest as outer beauty, a very Taoist and holistic idea. Many women and men believed that cultivating inner tranquility would also maintain youthful looks. Techniques of breathing and meditation, especially among Taoist practitioners, were thought to circulate energy, qi, and blood, thus sustaining a vibrant appearance. Some manuals on nourishing life advised women to practice deep breathing at dawn, facing east, or gentle stretches to keep posture and figure youthful. And indeed, good posture, standing straight but relaxed, was part of bearing for both sexes. A slouch was never elegant. Philosophically, Confucianism played a dual role in concepts of beauty. On one hand, it set very strict expectations for women to be modest, chaste, and to put family duty above personal vanity. Confucian guides like Ban Zhao's Lessons for Women, 1st century, explicitly say that a woman should not focus on having a pretty or perfect face and form, but rather on virtue and hard work. To them, too much adornment could signal moral laxity or distract from a woman's domestic roles. In fact, the 4 virtues of women in Confucian teaching included appearance, meaning she should be tidy, modest in dress, not overdressed or exposing, carrying herself with dignity. So the ideal was a balanced approach: be naturally lovely and appropriately dressed to reflect well on your family, but do not venture into gaudiness or seduction. They even equated a demure, almost fragile physical demeanor with moral goodness. In art and literature, the virtuous heroine is often portrayed as delicate and soft-spoken, her very frailty considered a sign of purity that inspires others to protect and cherish her. A truly graceful lady was to be self-effacing. If someone praised her beauty, she ought to deny or downplay it, attributing any nice appearance to the clothes or heaven's blessing, not her own efforts. Taoism, with its emphasis on naturalness, offered a somewhat contrasting view. A common Taoist sentiment was that the unadorned, simple state is closest to the Tao, the natural way. There are amusing anecdotes of Taoist-leaning aesthetes praising a country girl with wind-tousled hair and no makeup as more charming than a fully powdered court lady because she was authentic, like a wild flower versus a hothouse bloom. The Taoist classic Zhuangzi even has parables illustrating that true beauty is in natural spontaneity, free from social artifices. However, Taoism also gave rise to alchemical pursuits of physical immortality, which ironically led to a great focus on preserving one's body. Many Taoist elixirs and practices promise to keep people youthful or even reverse aging. We mentioned the extremes, emperors taking mercurial pills. On a gentler front, some eminent women pursued longevity through cosmetics and wellness rather than mystic alchemy. The only female emperor, Wu Zetian of Tang, famously used elaborate beauty regimens even in old age, applying facial masks of pearl powder, ginseng, and other herbal extracts, and devising skincare potions with plant oils to maintain a youthful appearance. Chronicles claim that even in her 60s, her skin was still smooth and fair, something she took great pride in, though courtiers likely flattered her in records. Whether entirely true or not, such accounts show the desire to preserve one's beauty endured even into later years for those in power. She apparently once lamented that aging was robbing her of beauty, and thus she patronized experts to create anti-aging concoctions for her. It's said she invented a fairy powder of Chinese mugwort and other herbs to apply on the face. We don't know the efficacy, but clearly she, like many, equated maintaining beauty with maintaining influence and felt it worth any effort. Buddhism also influenced perspectives, though it taught that all worldly beauty is impermanent and superficial compared to spiritual enlightenment. Some devout Buddhists, especially those who became nuns, would even reject adornments and shave their heads to focus on the inner self. Yet Buddhist art is filled with celestial beings, apsaras of exquisite beauty, perhaps suggesting that spiritual merit radiates as an otherworldly beauty. A balance was struck by many. Women would visit temples to pray not only for family or fortune, but sometimes quietly for beauty or the love that beauty might bring. A popular deity for women was Guan Yin, the bodhisattva of compassion, often depicted as a lovely, serene lady. Women prayed to her for all sorts of blessings, including bearing children. Another aspect of beauty is fertility in traditional thought, and small folk rituals existed, like praying to the weaver girl star Vega on the Kyushi festival night. Young girls would beg her for skill in needlework, and sometimes for attractiveness to secure a good marriage. Superstitions abounded. If a girl was born with a little beauty mark, mole near her mouth or eye, some would say it foretold a romantic or luxurious life. Conversely, a mole in the wrong place might be seen as unlucky. There was an art of mian shang, face reading, practiced by fortune tellers, where they'd read a person's character and fate from their facial features. A broad forehead could mean intelligence and noble fate, a small rounded chin, kindness and a loving nature, very large eyes, a passionate, sometimes unsteady character, a small, delicate mouth, good breeding and obedience. One can imagine mothers looking hopefully at their infant daughter's face, wondering if those gently arched brows or that pretty little mouth meant she'd be a fortunate bride someday. At times, women even tried to alter their fate by altering appearance slightly. There are records of women having a good mole but in the wrong spot, who would paint a fake mole elsewhere to move its effect. Or a girl might subtly reshape her eyebrow line to better fit an auspicious shape described in face-reading manuals. There were also charms and talismans specifically aimed at enhancing or preserving beauty. A woman might commission a tiny painting of Magu, the hemp maiden, a female immortal associated with youth, to hang in her room for eternal youth. Or she might wear an amulet embroidered with certain symbols, like a toad. Believe it or not, a three-legged toad was associated with the moon and longevity, and by extension, lasting beauty. Some Taoist priests gave out beauty talismans, written spells on paper to be burned, and the ashes mixed into bath water or tea. Did those work? Likely only by placebo effect, but if a woman believed she had celestial help, perhaps she carried herself with more confidence, and confidence itself is attractive. One intimate tradition involved lovers or spouses exchanging a lock of hair as a token. When a woman married, she and her husband might cut a small lock of hair each and tie them together with red thread, then store it in a silk pouch as a symbol that their lives were bound. The term jfa, to tie hair, became a poetic reference to marriage. This custom underscores how hair, the very element of one's beauty, was used as a bond of love. It also hints that beauty and personal adornment had an emotional and relational dimension, not just a social one. For a husband to keep his wife's youthful lock of hair is to cherish her beauty and presence always. There's a poignant image in literature of a man, years after his beloved wife passed, opening a memory box and finding a lock of her soft black hair. By then she is gone, and even the hair has lost its shine, but in his mind, she is forever the beautiful girl he married. Throughout literature, the language of flowers, moonlight, and delicate creatures is used to describe human beauty. Women were compared to lotuses, out of mud yet clean, elegantly emerging, to peonies, rich and stunning, to willows, graceful and yielding, even to the bright moon, radiant but distant. Men were compared to jade, pure, strong, or to a pine tree, stalwart, evergreen through adversity. These metaphors show how the society saw beauty as part of the natural and moral order. A beautiful woman might be described as a flower in the courtyard, treasured but perhaps sheltered. If someone said, "She has the face of a peach blossom and the heart of a bodhisattva," they meant she was as pretty as a spring bloom and as kind as a saint, an ultimate praise combining outer and inner beauty. As we cast our eyes one more time around this world of antiquity, we see the countless scenes of beauty we've explored. The lonely imperial consort gazing at the moon, wondering if the emperor will call her tonight. The village girl giggling with friends by the well, admiring a fresh lotus she's tucked into her braid. The dignified matron carefully applying a little powder to her nose before greeting guests, recalling the days in her youth when she was considered a great beauty at the Lantern Festival. The scholar painting an imaginary portrait of his faraway lover with strokes of ink, each brush line a poetic comparison, her lashes like feathery clouds, her smile like emerging sun, the little sachets of fragrance, the mirrors reflecting hopeful faces, the combs collecting fallen hairs that perhaps a maid will later clean out and save. Some people kept a ball of their own shed hair, called falling flowers, sometimes weaving it into a memento. The strands of hair, the threads of silk, the dust of cosmetics, all these humble, intimate things carrying the great weight of aspiration, the desire to be beautiful and to experience the world beautifully. Now, our exploration has been long and detailed, and the night grows deeper. Let us gradually withdraw from these historical scenes, carrying with us some of their tranquility. Picture once more the gentlewoman we began with, but now the day is done for her. The oil lamps are lit again in her chamber, casting a warm glow on the painted folding screen in the corner. She sits at her vanity once more, this time to unmake her beauty for sleep. The long pins and ornaments have been taken out. Her maid carefully places them back into the jewelry case. Her thick black hair tumbles freely down her back as the intricate style is unbound, the scalp perhaps sighing in relief. The maid runs a comb through it slowly to relax her mistress before bed. The lady has changed into a comfortable nightrobe made of soft cotton or thin silk in a plain pattern. In the bronze mirror now, a more tender face appears. The same woman, but younger looking without the white powder and red lipstick, her skin a natural warm ivory in the lamplight, a hint of flush from the day's rouge still on her cheeks. She takes a damp cloth and gently wipes it over her face, removing the cosmetics. The white and pink hues transfer onto the cloth. With each pass, a more natural complexion emerges, a bit of glow from the massage. She might apply a light cream, perhaps one made of lotus root starch and jade powder to keep her skin moist overnight. She dabs a bit around the eyes. Maybe she'll place thin slices of cucumber or a brewed tea bag over them for a few minutes, a secret trick to prevent any puffiness. Yes, they did stuff like that too. She massages her face with her fingers in small circles, stimulating circulation the way her mother taught. This prevents wrinkles, they believe. She looks at the bronze mirror and sees a familiar face looking back, perhaps a bit tired now. She allows herself a full smile now, knowing no one is watching except her maid, and the maid is discreet and loyal. The smile transforms her face, showing the lively girl she still is inside, beneath all the propriety. The maid can't help but smile back. They exchange a few soft words, maybe discussing the pleasant weather today or plans for tomorrow's attire. The lady then stands and stretches slightly, loosening the day's stiffness. She steps out to the veranda for a moment as well, just as she did in the morning, to say goodnight to the moon and stars. The garden is silvered in moonlight. The air is cooler, carrying the night perfumes of jasmine and night blooming cereus. She breathes deeply, letting the pure night air cleanse her spirit. In the distance, a flute is being played, perhaps a night watchman, or just a musician in a nearby home enjoying the quiet. The melody is slow and mournful, drifting over the roofs. She listens, leaning on a post, her long hair slightly tousled by a gentle breeze. At this moment, she is utterly herself, not a curated image, but a human being, feeling the night's beauty. In her mind, she composes a tiny poem. By day, I wore flowers in my hair. Now by night, I bathe in moonlight. Who knows my heart? Perhaps she will write it down tomorrow in her journal. She returns inside. Her maid has turned down the bedding, a soft mattress on a wooden frame with silk quilts. On a small stand, a stick of lavender incense or aloes wood incense is burning in a bronze censer, releasing thin curls of smoke. This is to keep the room scented and also to repel insects through the night. The lady sits on the edge of her bed, takes out a little embroidered case that holds her jewelry from the day, and checks that everything has been put away. She notices one small thing, a tiny hairpin carved with her favorite flower, say a chrysanthemum, that she left on the vanity. She picks it up, a leftover from the morning's glory. Holding it between her fingers, she thinks quietly of the passage of time. All the adornment we put on each day, we also take off each night. There's a natural cycle there, like blossoms that open at sunrise and close at sunset. She places the hairpin in its box. The maid has quietly left to her own quarters after helping her mistress prepare for bed. Our lady is alone now. She draws the bed curtains, enveloping herself in a cocoon of silk gauze that will keep out any mosquitoes. Lying down on the cool pillow, she lets out a soft sigh of contentment and weariness. Another day in her life has passed, uneventful perhaps, but in its own way complete. She has done her small part to bring beauty and order into the world, even if only within her household. There is a sense of satisfaction in that routine and an anticipation for tomorrow's. As she closes her eyes, perhaps images dance in her mind of earlier eras and legendary beauties she's heard about, much as we have journeyed tonight. She might recall a line from a story of Wang Zhaojun, the Han Dynasty beauty, who volunteered to marry a nomadic chieftain to secure peace. How it was said that when she left the frontier on horseback, her sorrowful face made the migrating wild geese fall from the sky because they forgot to flap their wings. She wonders what it must feel like to have such beauty attributed to you that nature itself stands still. Or she thinks of Shi, the beauty of Yue, who was so lovely that when she leaned over a pond, the fish in it were so dazzled they went straight to the bottom. The poetic idiom calls her the one for whom fish sank. She imagines Shi wringing silk by a river, a simple village girl whose great beauty became entangled in political legend. These tales feel half like dreams or fairy tales to her now, as she drifts towards sleep, blending with her own memories of the day, the scent of her morning tea, the touch of her maid braiding her hair at night, the distant flute. Our Lady sleeps. In her dreams, perhaps she's walking through a garden of the past, in conversation with those legendary beauties, or simply feeling the petals of mythical flowers brush against her cheek. Her face in slumber is peaceful, without conscious effort to pose or perform. She looks younger, more like the girl she once was, picking mulberries by a country lane, or learning embroidery with a giggle. Sleep is the great rejuvenator. Even the cosmetic texts advise that enough sleep is crucial for maintaining one's complexion and calm aura. We will let her sleep soundly, her breath soft and even, the curtain swaying ever so gently with her exhalations. As for us, gently withdrawing from her chamber and her time, we carry with us a sense of calm and continuity. Over these hours, we've quietly witnessed rituals and stories spanning thousands of years. We felt the warm sunlight of ancient courtyards, smelled the faint perfume of bygone blooms pressed into powder, and heard the whispering steps of silk slippers on polished floors, long turned to dust. Yet, in our imagination, those moments live again, vivid and undying. Beauty in ancient China was not simply a matter of vanity. It was a language, a code, a comfort, and sometimes a cage. It required patience and craft. It was painted on in the morning and carefully removed at night. It was dictated by forces of tradition and yet personalized by each woman's touch. It caused joy. Think of a girl admiring a new hairpin and smiling, and it caused pain, as in the bound feet or the lonely weight of a concubine. In other words, it was profoundly human. Now, as you lie here listening, perhaps with eyes closed, you might reflect that while the particulars differ, the essence of those ancient pursuits of beauty is universal and timeless. The desire to present our best selves, to find moments of grace in our day, to connect to others through a smile or a pleasing appearance that lives in all of us. And when we recognize it in these historical women, we feel a kinship that spans eras. It is late, and the world around us is quiet. In your mind's eye, you might still see the soft glow of lantern light in a tranquil bedroom from centuries ago, or catch the echo of silk rustling along a marble corridor, or the distant notes of that bamboo flute under the moon. Hold on to those gentle impressions as you allow yourself to drift into your own peaceful sleep. You are safe, you are here, and in this moment, you too are part of this long, unbroken thread of human experience, connecting to those quiet souls across time who also looked at the moon before bed and felt a silent camaraderie with someone far away. Perhaps as Our Lady sleeps, her dream self walks under the same moon as you, humming an ancient lullaby. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. I hope it has brought you a measure of calm, a few interesting images to ponder, and a reassurance that even in the grand flow of history, the small tender rituals, brushing one's hair, steeping tea, watching a flower bloom, carry great meaning. Also, if you're still awake and listening, I gently remind you to subscribe and join me again for more dreamlike travels through history. And do share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I find it heartwarming to know how far these quiet moments reach, linking us across the globe. For now, let go of any remaining thoughts or tensions. Imagine the softest silk easing your burdens, the faintest fragrance of night flowers soothing your senses. You have all the time in the world to rest. As the ancients would say, may you have peaceful dreams and awaken as refreshed as a lotus in morning dew. Good night.